We are happy to have as a guest Oleksandr Mererezhko, Deputy of Ukraine Chairman of the Foreign Policy Committee of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. Hello, Mr. Mererezhko.
Hello, thank you for having me.
My first question, under what conditions do you think the vision of a global peace summit becomes a reality?
Well, I think that it is already becoming a reality, but of course, to make it a sort of comprehensive peace global summit, we need to invite and to attract as many countries as possible. And I think that we already have enough countries which have agreed to join this peace summit.
So what reaction Ukraine actually expects from the world, and what kind of a support, if rather say?
Well, first of all, our primary goal is, of course, to implement the peace formula by the President Zelensky. And it became known that this peace formula, which consists of 10 points, gives an opportunity for each country to sort of pick and choose. If, for example, one of the country is eager to join only 1 or 2 points of this peace formula, it's perfectly okay. For example, energy security or global food security. And we expect to implement this peace formula and to start the process of reform of the global security system and the United Nations organization also.
Obviously, some of Ukraine partners support all of Zelensky's peace formula. I've heard that, we know that. In some paragraphs, and for some countries, it can be called a great success if they support to join one paragraph. Which paragraph of the formula might you think inside discussions the most in attempts to somehow rewrite, to change the Ukrainian vision of a just peace?
Well, each point of this formula deserves attention and implementation, but the formula is structured in such a way which starts with the issues in which are supposed to be interested most countries or all the countries in the world. For instance, the first point of this formula is nuclear security. And I'm sure that there cannot be any disagreements regarding nuclear security. And maybe one of the most difficult points of this formula for some countries, especially global south, might be the issue of accountability, bringing to justice all the perpetrators and war criminals. It might create some, I would say, political issues, but for some countries. But at the same time, in principle, I believe that each country should also be interested in implementation this point also.
Well, Mr. Mererezhko, I'm absolutely with you. But another question is, why do you think some countries, I know exactly what countries you're talking about, but why these countries having that issue of accountability? I mean, this is the crime and the punishment, isn't it? Russia is killing people every day in Ukraine. And what? Just to let it go? To forget it?
Well, exactly. You see that I'm also professor of international law, and all my life I devoted to international law. And I know that we cannot talk about effective international legal system unless we have accountability. Because when we deny accountability, it leads to undermining the whole system of international law. That's why it's crucially important to persuade all the countries in the world to bring to justice the perpetrators, those war criminals who committed horrible crimes against humanity, war crimes and crime of aggression, because it is in the interests of each country to support in this way international law. Because now we have Ukraine as a victim of the aggression. Tomorrow it might be any other country in the world. That's why we should be united in implementing accountability.
Well, when we are talking between each other right now about the countries, what we really mean by that is some politicians that needed to be persuaded in this, maybe even forced, talked, I don't know, do something about anything, because some countries like, for example, Israel is the nation and the government are absolutely clearly divided. The nation helps Ukraine, the government is, I don't know, pro-Russian or neutral, which I'm not talking about what is going on now, but how can you be neutral to an absolute disaster in the heart of Europe and just because you're far away, well, you're not, obviously. So these politicians that are now having their voices and raising their red flags and are not ready to for accountability of the criminals, maybe they can be forced if they are called the criminals just as well. Just as a question from me.
You're right that we cannot be neutral when it comes to crimes against humanity, acts of genocide. And I can recall the words of President Kennedy, who came to Ireland and said, talking to the parliament of this country, he said that Ireland is a neutral country, but it is not neutral in the face of the struggle between tyranny and freedom. And I also believe that countries cannot be neutral when a genocide takes place, when act of aggression takes place, because these are crimes committed not only against one particular country, in this regard, Ukraine. It's a crime committed against the whole international community, against each country and against each person in the world.
Okay, I hate to even imagine a situation like that, but are there any points on which Kyiv would accept a compromise? I repeat, a compromise, not a discussion, because Kyiv is obviously ready for compromise, for discussion. But the compromise is a totally different thing. If you compromise, it seems to me, even one point, one paragraph of this formula, you compromise the just peace, and you're going right to appeasement of the criminal authority of Kremlin, and that's it. But maybe, I have to ask the question, would Kyiv accept a compromise on any point of this formula, do you think?
Well, I think that some points can be discussed and there can be some kind of compromise. But it's easier to say where we cannot have compromise. We cannot have compromise when it comes to principles of international law. Among these principles are principles of territorial integrity, principle of sovereign equality of states, principle of the non-use of force in international relations. There cannot be compromised on these principles.
The last question, a very short one. If you can provide me with a fair and short answer, that would be just lovely. If that would be up to you to decide, what sanctions you would put onto Russia so they would not be able to circumvent it in any way?
Well, first of all, we need total isolation of the aggressor state. And I can give an example, the Covenant of the League of Nations. It gave an answer in one of its articles, what should be done when one state starts war against the other. And it was about total isolation. The aggressor should be totally isolated, punished, and reparations should be imposed on it.
Thank you very much for your time, for your expertise, and for what you do. It was nice to have you. Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much for this interesting conversation.